Most fathers would kill to protect their children. Choi Seung-Jin had already killed for less. He was the kind of man whose shadow bent entire city blocks, a billionaire mafia boss whose silence could end careers, lives, bloodlines. But on a rain-soaked Tuesday night in a forgotten diner off Route 9, it wasn't a traitor's confession or a rival's ambush that shattered his carefully constructed armor. It was one sentence from a stranger's son, a black child with eyes too wise for his age, that reached into Seung-Jin's chest and pulled out the ghost he'd buried beneath a decade of violence. Subscribe now, because that sentence didn't just wreck a man. It ignited a war between the life he commanded and the family he never knew he was dying without. Before we continue, please take a second to subscribe and like. Your support honestly encourages me more than you know. The bell above the diner door didn't chime. It rattled, a tired sound that matched the fluorescent hum bleeding through cracked vinyl booths. Seung-Jin pushed inside at 2:47 a.m., his Italian wool coat soaked black from rain that had nothing to do with the wound he could feel opening behind his ribs. Not a knife, not a bullet. The kind of betrayal that comes with a signature, your oldest friend's name on documents designed to erase you from the empire you built in blood and silence. He didn't choose this place. His driver had, after Seung-Jin dismissed him with 2 words and a look that ended careers. Now he stood in a kingdom of peeling laminate and burned coffee, a man whose silence could topple cities reduced to dripping on someone else's floor. Counter or booth? Honey? The voice didn't match the exhaustion in the room. It was warm, textured, alive. Seung-Jin's eyes tracked the source. A woman whose skin caught the bad lighting and made it look like amber, whose posture suggested she'd survived worse nights than this and still remembered how to stand straight. Alana. Her name tag was crooked. He noticed because noticing kept him from thinking about how his second-in-command had smiled while recommending the merger that would gut him. Counter. His voice came out flat, a CEO's voice, the kind that made subordinates check their reflections for weakness. She didn't flinch. Coffee's fresh if you're not picky, pie's honest if you are. She was already pouring before he answered, steam curling between them like a question he didn't know how to ask. When she set the cup down, her fingers didn't shake. Everyone's fingers shook around him. Enemies. Allies. The brother who'd just sold him to their rivals for a board seat and 30 pieces of silver disguised as stock options. But not hers. Long night? Alana leaned against the counter, and something in her tone suggested she wasn't making small talk. She was offering an exit ramp from whatever hell he was driving through. Seung-Jin's jaw tightened. He'd spent 2 hours in a penthouse suite watching security footage of his inner circle laughing about his blind spots. He'd built his entire kingdom on reading people, on knowing who would break before they knew it themselves. He hadn't seen this coming. Something like that, he said, the words tasting like ash. She studied him with eyes that had clearly seen men pretend they were fine when they were hemorrhaging. "You've got that look," she said quietly, the one people get when someone they trusted just reminded them why trust is a luxury. Seung-Jin's hand stopped halfway to the coffee cup. No one spoke to him like this. No one read him like this. He was Choi Seung-Jin, the name whispered in boardrooms and back alleys, the man who turned silence into a weapon. But she wasn't looking at the legend. She was looking at the man whose empire was currently eating itself from the inside, and she was handing him a napkin, like maybe he was allowed to be human for 5 minutes. Somewhere behind the kitchen door, a child laughed, bright, unguarded, unafraid. The sound cracked something in Seung-Jin's chest he'd thought was already dead. "You look sad." Seung-Jin's jaw tightened. "I'm fine." "No." Lucas shook his head slowly, certain. "You look like my mom's flowers when she forgets to water them. Like you're still standing up. But you're already dying inside." It wasn't a rival's bullet that brought him to his knees. It was 5 words from a 7-year-old boy that stripped him of his crown and forced him to face a truth he had buried in blood. Stay tuned, because one sentence is about to wreck a dynasty. The rain had stopped lying to him 3 blocks ago. Now it just fell, cold, indifferent. The kind of downpour that didn't care if you were a king or a corpse. Seung-Jin pushed through the diner's glass door at 2:17 a.m., and the bell above it didn't recognize his name. Good. That made one thing in this city that didn't. His hand pressed against his ribs where Minho's knife hadn't needed to break skin to draw blood. Betrayal was an internal wound. It bled slower, but it bled everywhere. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and decades of grease that had seeped into the walls, into the cracked vinyl booths, into the soul of a place that had given up on ambition sometime around 1987. He liked it immediately. She didn't look up when he slid into the corner booth. The black woman behind the counter was wiping down the formica with the kind of rhythm that suggested she'd done this 10,000 times and would do it 10,000 more without complaint or applause. Her name tag said Alana, but the way she moved said, Survivor. He knew the posture. He'd built an empire on reading it. A small boy sat at the counter swinging his legs, a coloring book spread before him like architecture. He couldn't have been more than 7, but his eyes tracked Seung-Jin's entrance with the kind of attention that made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed yet. Coffee. The bus arrived exactly 4 minutes early every morning for a week straight. Alana noticed on Tuesday. By Friday, she was checking the transit app with the kind of suspicion most people reserve for unopened envelopes from the IRS. Philadelphia's SEPTA didn't just decide to fix a route overnight. Someone had to pay, pressure, or threaten. She knew which category Choi Seung-Jin fell into. The grocery store was next. Her favorite brand of gochugaru, the one she could only find twice a year at the Korean market in Olney, suddenly appeared on the shelf at her corner bodega, nestled between the Goya adobo and the Morton's salt like it had always belonged there.
Hey, armor souls, take all this time to go take your water. Take your water. Bye.
Then the streetlights. Every single bulb on her 6-block walk home from the diner flickered to life the same night. Not the city's doing. The potholes got filled. The broken bench at the bus stop was replaced. Her world was bending. Seung-Jin wasn't writing checks. He was rewriting her reality, one invisible thread at a time, and that was worse. Money she could refuse. But this? This was control disguised as care, and it made her skin crawl in a way she couldn't articulate to Lucas, who only noticed that Mama seemed upset even when nothing was wrong. She found him on a Wednesday night, parked in a black sedan across from her building like a shadow that had forgotten to move. No bodyguards, no engine running, just him, alone in the dark, watching her window the way a man watches a house fire he started by accident. Alana didn't scream. She walked up to the driver's side window and tapped twice with her knuckle. Sharp, deliberate. The glass slid down. Seung-Jin looked at her with those same calculating eyes, but now she saw the fracture underneath, the exhaustion, and the desperation of a man trying to build a fortress out of bus schedules and streetlights. She handed him a folded piece of paper. "What is this?" His voice was low, confused. "An invoice," Alana said, "for consultation services." He unfolded it slowly. The line items were handwritten. Emotional labor, peace of mind, redemption therapy. At the bottom, in bold, amount due. Stop. You're using my peace of mind to treat your own guilt, Mr. Choi. Her voice didn't waver. In my world, we don't take things for free, and that includes the redemption you're trying to steal from me. Seung-Jin stared at the paper like it was written in a language he used to know but had forgotten. His jaw tightened. "I'm protecting you." "No." Alana leaned down until their eyes were level. "You're hiding behind me. You think if you can fix my life, you won't have to face your own. But I'm not your shield and I'm not your project. You want redemption? Earn it. Stop running. She stepped back. The window rose. The engine started. And for the first time in 15 years, Choi Seung-Jin had nowhere left to hide. If you want to see what happens when a billionaire runs out of armor, subscribe and like now, because the next chapter strips him completely bare. The invitation arrived in a black silk envelope, hand-delivered to the diner during Alana's shift. No return address, just embossed gold lettering that read, "The Seung Foundation Autumn Gala," and a handwritten note in precise calligraphy. You gave me dignity when I had none. Allow me to return it. Alana stared at the note for 3 days before Lucas found it tucked inside her apron pocket. Mr. King wants to see us? His eyes lit up with the kind of hope she'd learned to distrust. She should have said no. Should have returned the envelope with a polite refusal. But the truth was, Seung-Jin had been haunting the edges of her life like smoke, paying her landlord anonymously, leaving groceries on her doorstep, ensuring Lucas's medical bills vanished into thin air. She was tired of being someone's charity case. If he wanted to repay a debt, she'd let him, on her terms. The Peninsula Hotel ballroom glittered with old money and older bloodlines. Women draped in Chanel and men armored in custom. Tom Ford moved through the space like chess pieces, each step calculated, each smile a transaction. Seung-Jin stood near the marble staircase in a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than her annual rent, his face unreadable as stone. He scanned the crowd with the mechanical precision of a man who'd learned to catalog threats before breathing. Then Alana walked in. The room didn't gasp. It exhaled. She wore a hanbok reimagined, deep emerald silk with gold embroidery cascading down the gioghery, but the skirt had been tailored into a sleek modern silhouette that moved like water when she walked. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo adorned with a single jade pin, her shoulders bare and regal. Lucas walked beside her in a crisp white shirt and black slacks, his small hand gripping hers like an anchor. Seung-Jin's mask cracked, just for a second. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and something ancient and vulnerable flickered across his face before he buried it again beneath control. He crossed the room in 6 strides, stopping just short of touching her. "You honor my mother's country," he said quietly, his voice rough at the edges. "I honor myself," Alana corrected, her tones soft but immovable. "I didn't come here to play dress-up for your guilt, Seung-Jin. I came because Lucas deserves to see that the world is bigger than a diner booth." His jaw tightened. Around them, whispers slithered through the crowd like serpents. Who is she? Where did he find her? Does she know what he is? Lucas tugged Seung-Jin's sleeve. "You look sad again, Mr. King." Seung-Jin knelt, eye level with the boy. And for the first time all night, his voice lost its edge. Not sad, grateful. Alana watched him, this man who commanded empires and buried enemies, kneeling before her son like a penitent. And she realized the most dangerous thing about Choi Seung-Jin wasn't his power, it was how desperately he wanted to surrender it. The call came at 3:47 a.m., the kind of hour when the world belongs to the guilty and the grieving. Seung-Jin's phone vibrated against polished stone, pulling him from a sleep that had never been restful. Alana's voice fractured through the speaker before he could speak, each word a shard of glass cutting through his carefully maintained composure. Lucas wasn't breathing right. The ambulance was already screaming toward Mercy General. He arrived before his own driver could process the address, still wearing yesterday's shirt, and the silk wrinkled in ways his staff had never witnessed. The emergency room fluorescence turned everyone into ghosts, but Alana was solid and shaking in the corner, her elegance stripped down to bare survival instinct. She didn't look up when his shadow fell across her. She was counting her son's breaths from behind a wall of glass and hospital policy. The attending physician spoke in the clinical monotone of someone delivering verdicts, not diagnoses. Congenital heart defect, Previously undetected, now critical. The words pooled between them like spilled mercury, impossible to gather back. Seung-Jin had built empires on information asymmetry, on knowing what others didn't. But this knowledge felt like drowning. He watched Lucas through the ICU window, small chest rising and falling with mechanical assistance, and understood for the first time in his adult life what powerlessness tasted like. He made 17 calls in the first hour. Specialists from Johns Hopkins, surgeons who'd performed miracles in Zurich, a cardiovascular team he'd once funded in Seoul. His phone became a weapon he was firing into the void, each conversation a transaction he was trying to force into existence. But medicine, he was learning, didn't negotiate. The best doctors in 3 countries told him the same truth in different accents. They needed time the boy might not have, and money couldn't accelerate biology. Alana found him in the hallway around dawn, his back against institutional beige, the phone finally silent in his hands. She sat beside him without asking permission, their shoulders not quite touching. Her voice came out steady, which somehow made it worse. She'd been here before, she said. Different hospital, same terror, back when Lucas was 2, and pneumonia had carved out a week of her life. She'd survived it alone then. She wasn't asking him to stay now, but he heard what she wasn't saying. He'd spent decades reading subtext in boardrooms and backrooms, parsing the space between words where power lived. This was different. This was an invitation disguised as release, a woman strong enough to stand alone, but brave enough to admit she didn't want to. He didn't leave. When the surgical team finally cleared Lucas for the procedure, Seung-Jin was still there. Wrinkled silk and all. He held Alana's hand in the waiting room. This woman he barely knew. This child who'd wrecked him with a single sentence. And for the first time since his mother's funeral, Choi Seung-Jin understood that some things couldn't be controlled, only witnessed. Some battles couldn't be won with strategy. Sometimes presence was the only currency that mattered. The boardroom smelled like imported leather and old threats. 15 men in charcoal suits sat around a table built from a single slab of Korean oak, their faces carved from the same stone that had witnessed decades of blood transactions. They didn't raise their voices. They never needed to. "The boy makes you weak," the eldest said, fingers steepled like a temple collapsing inward. "The woman makes you visible. Visibility is death in our world, Seung-Jin see." Seung-Jin stood at the window, watching rain streak down glass that cost more than most men earned in a year. Somewhere across the city, Lucas was asleep in a hospital bed with monitors tracking a heartbeat that had nearly stopped 3 days ago. Alana sat beside him in a chair she refused to leave, her hand wrapped around their son's, like she could anchor him to life through sheer will. "You will step back," another voice commanded, not asked. "Let the organization handle the exposure. We've already arranged relocation for the woman. The child will be provided for. You remain untouchable." The word landed like a blade between his ribs. Untouchable. He'd built an empire on that single principle, had murdered his own capacity for softness to achieve it. His mother's voice still lived in his skull, the last thing she'd whispered before the cancer took her. "You've already died inside, my son. I can see it in your eyes." Lucas had said the same thing in a diner 6 months ago. A 7-year-old stranger with a napkin and a truth that cracked Seung-Jin's chest open. He turned from the window. The men at the table watched him with the patience of executioners who'd already loaded the chamber. "I'm out." Silence. The kind that precedes earthquakes. "You don't resign from blood, Seung-Jin, you know this." "Then I'm buying my way out. Name the price." The eldest leaned back, a thin smile curving like a knife. "There is no price for cowardice. You leave with nothing. No name, no protection, no empire. You become a ghost we no longer recognize." Seung-Jin felt the weight of the Patek Philippe on his wrist, the silk of his shirt. the tailored prison of a suit that cost more than Alana's annual rent. He thought of Lucas asking why his eyes looked sad even when he smiled. He thought of Alana refusing his money until he offered his truth. Then I'm a ghost. He walked toward the door. No one stopped him. They didn't need to. They knew what he was sacrificing, could already see him dissolving into the irrelevance reserved for men who chose love over legacy. His phone buzzed as he reached the hallway. A text from Alana. Lucas asked for you. Says he had a dream you were a dragon who forgot how to fly. Come home. Seung-Jin deleted every contact in his phone except one. The Empire could have his throne. He'd finally found something worth kneeling for. Subscribe to see what a king looks like when he chooses to be human. The diner looked smaller than Seung-Jin remembered. Maybe because this time, he wasn't walking in alone with blood on his hands and ghosts in his chest. This time, Lucas sat across from him, sketching on a napkin while Alana poured coffee, her fingers brushing his shoulder as she passed. A touch so casual it still made his carefully controlled heartbeat stumble. Seung-Jin saw him first. Park Jae-won, Seoul's answer to unfinished business, flanked by two men whose suits cost more than the entire block. The kind of men who'd never stepped foot in a place like this unless they were burning it down. Alana's hand froze on the coffee pot. She'd seen enough danger in her life to recognize it wearing an expensive watch. Her eyes found Seung-Jin's, a silent question passing between them. He answered by standing, positioning himself so his body became a wall between her and the door. You should have stayed dead, Hyung, Jae-won said in Korean, his voice carrying that particular softness men use right before they pull triggers. A king who abandons his throne for a woman doesn't get to keep breathing. Seung-Jin felt Alana stiffen behind him. He reached back without looking, his hand finding hers, their fingers threading together with the kind of certainty that comes from choosing each other in 1,000 quiet moments before this loud one. You're right, Seung-Jin replied, switching to English so she would understand every word, every choice he was making in real time. A king who runs deserves what's coming, but I'm not running. I'm standing exactly where I chose to stand. Alana squeezed his hand. That small pressure said everything her mouth wouldn't, that she saw him, not the monster Seoul remembered, and she wasn't going anywhere. Jae-won laughed, in the sound sharp enough to cut glass. With what army? You think these people will die for your little love story? The bell above the door chimed. Marcus, the line cook who'd taught Seung-Jin how to flip eggs without breaking the yolk, stepped out from the kitchen. He wasn't holding a spatula. Another chime. Mrs. Chen from the laundromat next door, the woman whose son's medical bills Seung-Jin had paid without asking for a name in return. Then the mechanic. The postal worker. The teenager Seung-Jin had kept out of juvie by offering him a job instead of a lecture. One by one they filled the diner. Not with weapons. With presence. Alana's grip on Seung-Jin's hand tightened and he felt her other hand slide around his waist, anchoring him to this moment, to this choice, to this life they'd built from the wreckage of his old one. Jae-won's hand moved toward his jacket. Marcus cleared his throat, and suddenly the sound of 15 phones unlocking filled the air. 15 cameras pointing. 15 witnesses who knew exactly what they were watching. You came here to erase me, Seung-Jin said, pulling Alana closer, letting Jae-won see exactly what he'd walked away from Seoul to protect. But you can't erase what's already been rewritten. I'm not the king you remember. I'm just a man who finally learned the difference between power and love. Jae-won stared at the phones, at the faces, at Seung-Jin's hand pressed against Alana's back, like she was the only empire worth defending. He left without firing a shot. Lucas tugged both their sleeves. You guys okay? Alana kissed Seung-Jin's jaw, soft and deliberate, a public claim that would have terrified him months ago. Now it just felt like coming home. We're perfect, Seung-Jin whispered against her temple. We're finally perfect. The foundation didn't have a ribbon-cutting ceremony, No press, no champagne flutes clinking under crystal chandeliers. Just a repurposed warehouse in Brooklyn with uneven floors and windows that rattled when the subway passed. Seung-Jin stood in the doorway wearing jeans, actual denim, not the $1,000 kind, watching Lucas teach a kid from the neighborhood how to fold origami cranes. The boy's hands fumbled with the paper the same way Lucas's had 6 months ago, before the surgery, before his fingers remembered how to be steady. Alana emerged from the back office carrying a box of donated books, her hair tied up in a scarf that somehow made her look more elegant than any gown ever could. She caught Seung-Jin staring and raised an eyebrow. "You planning to help or just stand there looking at me like that?" "Like what?" he asked, though the warmth in his voice gave him away. "Like I hung the moon," she said softly, setting the box down. "You did," he replied, and meant it. The foundation had a simple mission: provide resources for single parents navigating medical crises. No bureaucracy, no means testing. Just help when people needed it most. Seung-Jin had liquidated assets his former associates thought untouchable. Alana had contributed something more valuable, a network of people who actually knew what struggling looked like, and a heart that refused to let anyone fight alone. Together, they built something that didn't require anyone to bow or beg. Lucas looked up from his origami, catching them in one of those moments where their hands found each other without thinking. "Are you guys gonna kiss again?" he asked, grinning. "Because last time you said just once, and then it was like, a lot." Alana laughed, the sound filling the warehouse like music. "Finish your cranes, sir." It had become their ritual. Every Saturday morning, the same diner booth where everything started, where a 7-year-old boy had looked at a bleeding man and said words that tore down an empire. The waitress knew their order by heart now. Lucas always asked for extra syrup. Alana always pretended she didn't want any, then stole bites from both their plates. Seung-Jin always ordered black coffee but lately found himself asking for cream, Alana's influence softening even his smallest edges. That morning, Lucas was sketching in a notebook between bites of pancake. He slid it across the table without warning. The drawing showed 3 figures: a tall man, a woman with a crown of stars in her hair, and a small boy holding both their hands. Above them, Lucas had written in careful letters, "My family." Seung-Jin's throat tightened. He looked at Alana, whose eyes were already glistening. "He's right, you know," Seung-Jin said quietly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You saved me, both of you." "We saved each other," Alana whispered, squeezing back. Lucas looked between them, then smiled in that knowing way children do when they understand more than adults give them credit for. "Can I be the ring bearer when you get married?" Alana's laugh was soft with tears. Seung-Jin pulled them both closer, one hand in hers, the other ruffling Lucas's hair. "Yeah, kid," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You can." And in that cracked diner booth, with syrup-sticky fingers and hearts full of something neither loneliness nor power had ever given them, they became what they'd always needed: whole. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Your subscription is the only way we can keep telling stories where love wins over power. Don't walk away now.